Hey guys, somebody asked the question, how do you respond when somebody plays an unknown, weird, or strange opening against you? And I thought it was a really good question. And so in this video, we're going to talk about 6 tips, 6 things you want to keep in mind when somebody plays something really weird and strange that you just haven't seen before. Let's get started. All right, so for this video, I'm going to be playing as white with e4 and then doing some weird stuff with black in response. And then we're going to talk through these 6 tips. So number 1 on the list. Does the move that your opponent play, or the series of moves that your opponent plays, does it create any obvious weaknesses, or does it have any obvious drawbacks? Okay, so for example, my opponent plays h5 on me, I play d4, and they play f6. Okay, this is a very silly example, but I want to make sure I illustrate this point. What is the drawback of, or what's the drawback of these two moves? Well, if you said this diagonal, and specifically the g6 square, you are correct. Why is the g6 square a weakness? Well, because there's no pawns that can control it now. Actually, no pieces are controlling it. So if I could magically put my queen or my bishop over there, it's game over. It's checkmate, right? And also this diagonal is kind of weak because a lot of times black could play the move g6 and have it very, strongly supported. You wouldn't really be able to do anything on that diagonal. But in this case, that's not really an option. So are there obvious weaknesses or drawbacks? Yes. So now that I've identified that, I can plan, okay, what might be a move that makes sense? And there's a couple of moves that come to mind. The first one is probably just bishop to e2, right? We're just going to attack that. And if black isn't paying attention, they just lost the game. They're getting checkmated. So, if they block, it's checkmate. And if they take, we just take with the queen and it's also checkmate, right? So that's kind of the first thing. Now, of course, black could play g6, but this is still a weakness that I'm going to keep an eye on as the game goes on, right? Maybe queen d3, bishop d3 at some point, with the idea of playing e5 to attack it. Let's go back a second. Also, bishop d3 right away. Same idea, right? I'm focusing on that diagonal. I'm planning to play e5. So, for example, black plays knight c6. I'm going to play e5. Guess what? Again, I'm threatening checkmate, and black has to figure out how to stop that, right? It's not easy, by the way. Another move, kind of a little bit more obscure, might be knight h3 or knight e2. And the point is, let's say black does a random move here. We're going to go knight to f4 and take advantage of that hole with our knight, right? So you see how I'm coming up with ideas based on the fact that, hey, there's an obvious weakness that was created by this opening that I can take advantage of. Okay, so make sure you check for that. Now, this is just one example of a weakness. There are other types of weaknesses. So let me show you another example. Black plays b6, d4, bishop to a6, and now I want to start thinking like, okay, what could be the obvious weakness or obvious drawback of this move? Well, what I'm noticing is that if I take it, this knight is on the rim, which is not usually a great place for a knight. It can't come to c5 because we've got it covered. It can't go to c7. It could go here, but then it's just going to lose a tempo. We're going to chase it away. Doesn't look like it has a very bright future. Also, what else do you notice about this knight? Well, it's not defended. So at any moment, these queen moves are going to attack the knight. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. Maybe I can use that at some point in the future. So for example, let's say I play knight f3, black plays knight f6, and I castle. And my opponent's like, oh, a free pawn. Well, what can I play now? That's right, queen to e2. I'm taking advantage of that knight over there, and look at this. It's a fork. I'm going to win a piece now. Black can't save both knights. So you see how I'm thinking through what are the drawbacks of these weird moves that my opponent played and how can I potentially take advantage of them, right? So that's tip number 1. Think about the weaknesses and the drawbacks. All right, tip number 2 is kind of related to the first one, but a little different. And it's you want to look for the more subtle weaknesses or drawbacks to what your opponent is playing. So last time we looked at very obvious, very blatant, very, of course, that's bad because you fill in the blank. Sometimes what they play, it's not so clear. So for example, e6, okay, looks like they're going to play French, and then they play d6. And we're like, okay. And then they play c6. And we're like, okay. And then they play f6. Well, is there an obvious weakness in black's position when they play this way? Not really. I mean, there's not, you could say this diagonal is a little weak, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. It's not as bad as when they had played h5, right? But what's a more subtle weakness from these moves? Well, the answer is that black's behind in development, right? And they can't castle anytime soon because they still have to get all these pieces out of the way, right? So how should I be thinking about playing going forward since I know that black is behind in development and probably isn't going to be able to castle soon? Well, the answer is I should be thinking about opening up the center. Why? Because for two reasons. Number one, like I said, the king's probably not going to be castled right away. And then also, black's behind in development. I already have 2 knights ready to go. If I can get some more pieces ready to go, it makes sense to open up the center. So for example, bishop d3, I don't know what black's going to play. Let's say that you just keep doing some weird stuff. Maybe queen to e2, we get our queen involved. And something like e5, trying to open up the center. And the point is that if we're able to accomplish this, let's say, I don't know, black takes here, we can take with the knight, and black is already in a bad position. We have queen h5 being threatened, so they kind of have to play knight f6, but now we can play bishop to g5. And notice how the fact that they're behind in development, haven't castled. Stockfish, you'll probably never guess it, but Stockfish has plus 6.7. Even though the position is equal material-wise, Stockfish says, nope, it's over, basically. Plus 7 now. So, you got to think a little bit deeper sometimes, right? It's not like immediately obvious what the weaknesses are, but think a little bit further. Okay, they're behind in development. Okay, they can't castle, whatever the case may be. And then how can you take advantage of that? All right, tip number 3, and this is probably the most important tip in this entire video. Okay, so pay close attention to this one, but just develop normally. Like a lot of times, maybe 8, 9 out of 10 times, when you see some weird stuff, most of the time, the best thing to do is just develop normally. Develop your pieces, castle, get control of the center, and you're going to be just fine. All right, so let me give you an example here. Black plays h6. What should we do? Well, let's just play the move that we would normally like to play, d4. They play a6. What should we do? Well, let's just play the normal move. Like, we don't have to, they're playing some weird moves. Let's go bring our queen and bishop out and checkmate them, right? That's how you're going to get into trouble, right? You don't need to do that. You need to just develop normally. Just bring your pieces out. Bring them out. And this is, you can't really go wrong playing moves like this, regardless of what they're doing. I'm just picking some random stuff here, but just develop normally. You're going to be fine, right? This is what Stockfish says you should do. Just get this set up. And now we've developed all 4 pieces. We've kind of solidified our center. Now is when Stockfish recommends, hey, now is maybe a good time to start attacking somewhere else, right? Here we can push our h-pawn and start asking black the question, what are you going to do with these random pawns that a4 could be another idea, right? I'll give you an example, knight to e5. And if black takes here and tries to attack us, it's fine. We can just play bishop to f4. We've got lots of pieces. This pawn is actually pretty annoying for black, but all we did was develop. We've got an attack here. We didn't really have to think too much, just played some normal looking moves, okay? So don't overcomplicate it. Just remember, if you're not sure, develop your pieces naturally, control the center, solidify the center, and you're going to be just fine. All right, tip number 4 is a bit of a different one, but when somebody plays something weird against you, what you can do is play something weird against them. Now, let me explain this one a little bit. So the move b3 is not super common for white. Okay, lots of times people are playing e4 or d4 or c4 or knight f3. b3, it's kind of rare, right? And what I've noticed a lot of times is it's kind of annoying because white gets this pressure on the e-pawn. Like if I do something normal like this, right, I have to deal with this. And then a lot of times they'll either play knight f3 or e3 and bishop here. And I have to figure out like how to defend my center. And I don't really like it because I always feel like the player playing the system with white kind of knows what they're doing. And I'm like not really sure the best way to approach it. And so one thing that I've experimented with and actually had pretty good results is as soon as I see b3, which is kind of a weird move, I play something even stranger myself, okay? So for example, f6. I've actually played this. I'm not joking. And when they play bishop to b3, I play knight to h6. And I reroute my knight to f7 and just get this huge control over e5 because I know that's what they're trying to attack, right? And I just put my knight there and, play e5 now. If they play d4, guess what? I can play d6. And if they take me, I'm just going to take back. And there's no pressure on e5. I've made sure of that, right? I have tons of pieces there. And I've had some good results with this. Is this the best way to approach it? Probably not. But it takes them out of their comfort zone, which is usually pretty rare. If you play standard moves, like e5 and d5, I guarantee you they've seen this many, many times and they know what to do. They have some sort of system, right, cooked up. When I play f6, most people start thinking, usually they play bishop b2. And then when I play knight h6, now they kind of start thinking like, what is this guy doing? Like, this is not normal. And so you get this interesting game. Nobody really knows the theory on move 2. and you're playing chess, but you didn't like fall for any tricks or traps or anything like that, and you survived a weird opening. Now, b3 maybe isn't the weirdest opening, but I've used the same technique against other stuff. So if somebody plays b4 and you're not sure what to do, play a5. You know, if they play here, play c5. What am I doing? I don't know. I'm just playing some kind of weird moves to mix it up, right? And so that's another option that you have. I just wanted to give you that. And a lot of times you really throw your opponents off. They think they're going to be surprising you, and it's actually gets flipped. All right, tip number 5 is you should categorize the opening your opponent's playing as either really, really bad, or it's maybe not the greatest, but it's not like super obvious to me why it might be bad, okay? And the reason you want to categorize that is because you need to understand, should you be attacking relatively quickly, or should you be kind of taking it a little bit slower? So let's go back to the example I showed earlier. They play h5 and then f6. How bad is this? Well, this is really bad, okay? This is a diagonal that, you know, we're taught as beginners to not weaken because your king is there. And so when we see this, we should immediately go, okay, this is a really big deal. I should be focusing on attacking this right away. I mean, that's really bad, right? Now let's compare that to an opening like this: h6, e6, a6, d6, b6, right? This is, I think this is called the hippo, maybe. Is it bad for black? Yeah, it's not really the greatest, but is it as obviously bad as the other one? No, like it's not. It's not that easy to figure out, you know, how to break this opening. So you need to identify pretty early on, how bad is it? And if it's super bad, like let's go back to this one, h5, d4, f6. This is the kind of opening where you want to start to think, okay, let's go on the offensive. Let's play a move like bishop e2 or bishop d3 and start thinking about how I can attack right away. If it's not that bad and it's more along the lines of something like this, you're not going to be able to checkmate the guy in the next 5 moves. It's just not going to happen. So don't even try to do that. Just play it a little bit slower. Keep developing your pieces, you know. Don't like overthink it. Just play good moves. And so it's important to identify which type of unusual opening you're facing. All right, guys, and tip number 6 is don't overthink it. So, you know, if you play e4 and your opponent plays the move f6, you might be tempted to just stop and like think and think and think and think and think. Okay, well, how do I, you know, what should I do? Like, are they going to play king f7 next? Or, you know, should I start thinking about how to set up a queen h5? Like, should I play bishop d3 and maybe e5? And should I play knight f3 and knight h4 so that I can play? What should I do? Should I just play d4? And you might sit there and spend a ton of time. Now, of course, this depends on what time control game you're playing and how much time you have available, but you don't really need to spend a significant chunk of your time if somebody plays this move. You can play a normal move. Stockfish says d4 is good, knight f3 is good, knight c3 is good. Just play something that's a good, solid, developing move, and then see what happens, you know? Now, if they play like g5, well, hey, you should start thinking, because, again, that's really, really bad, right? But if they play, let's just say, d6, okay, obviously this is not great. There's kind of a weak spot here. But should you spend hours and hours thinking, okay, what should I do? How do I make black pay for this bad opening? No, like just play a normal move. Play d4 or play knight c3 or, you know, bishop c4, like just something natural. This is a trap that I fell for myself many times. Somebody would play something like, especially as I got higher, I felt like I was a good player. I felt like I needed to kind of crush my opponents, you know, for playing moves like this. And what I found is that it's not that easy to do. Now, occasionally, you know, like I said, occasionally, if it's really bad, it's obvious. Okay, knight takes g5. Here's checkmate. Right? It's easy. That's fine. But in a lot of cases like this, it's like, I don't really know what to do. And the more you think about it, you can get into time pressure that you don't need to. Okay, go back to tip number 3. Just develop. Just play some good moves. Play d4. If they play b6, I'm not going to overthink it. I mean, yes, I'm paying attention to these light squares, but I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to develop my knight or my bishop, or, you know, and let the game kind of come to me. So hopefully that makes sense. Those are 6 tips that I have for dealing with unusual openings. Let me know if you guys think I left anything out, or if you have any other opinions on this matter. But a really good question. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys real soon. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.